Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code Slam the Gavel for 10% off your first year of Urgent Assist. This is also available in 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcisse Golden, passed away 5 months ago. He is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system, where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul, New York State, at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul, 518-474-8390, as well as give the senator a call to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have a return guests. I have Mark and Terri Stemann from letourchildrengo.org. They were last on season 4, episode 47 and episode 70. And the last time they were on, they gave updates on their case. And they were speaking out on the deprivation of rights and qualified immunity. So I welcome you back, Mark and Terri. How are you doing?
Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
Back with you.
Hello, Marianne. Thank you for hosting us again. We're very honored to be with you and everyone in your audience. We got some new things to talk about today, and we appreciate you checking in with us for an update on our situation, and then what we're discovering is happening to many families at large across the country.
Yeah, it's happening beyond frequently. I've never seen anything like this at this time.
Yeah, and in accordance with some of the things we talked about, that incentive there and the threat before all of our fellow Americans, and we talk a lot about the injuries being done to children and the breakup of the family unit, why that's so important to our country, but also the effect on parents and what's happening to parents. And a lot of parents suffer in silence. Many of them, like us initially when we were thrust into this, there's that that kind of embarrassment, and then you have to live down at those wrong thoughts that sometimes people attack you with in respect to, like, well, what did you do wrong? And so you gotta fight that huge uphill battle, in addition to just overcoming the shock of what parents experience when basically their children are kidnapped. I mean, that's what's happening. We have government sanctioned kidnapping, child trafficking networks who are operating within our system, our corrupt, even seditious system, and there's even more to it than that. And the first time we were with you, Marianne, we talked a lot about, our story and what happened to us. And as you said at the outset there, respect to our rights, which really should be for every American the paramount concern. These people try to disguise these child welfare actions as like, that the child's safety and best interest is the paramount concern. Well, no, that's not the case here in the United States of America. We're a free country, and we have constituted due process pursuant to criminal statutes in respect to child welfare actions, and our freedom and the securities and protections of our rights is the paramount concern. Because as we've said, if we have our rights, we're going to have our children, unless, of course, we've been charged with or convicted of a crime that would then fall under the review of we the people of the United States or our respective states. And that's how our founders set up our system. And yet, just as a quick overview, what many of your viewers, I'm sure, already know, what's happening is that fraudulent operation, we talked about it, just to summarize it, that the fraud op is that many parents who are having their children kidnapped under the color of law are not in a contract with the state. And that is not something that we constituted, that by birth we're automatically obligated to be contracted with the state in respect to the welfare of our children and any other of our affairs. The Fourth Amendment protects us against that. And yet, what we see happening is that children are being stolen from their parents on allegations pursuant to a framed civil proceeding, which makes it fraudulent. In some cases, there are charges of a crime, but those are very, very rare. And when they do occur, in some cases, those are dismissed, and then in other cases, they do proceed, in accordance with our constituted system. But at large, and this is what the big problem is within our country because of the monetary incentives, that they are going after families for the breakup of families, to the theft of our children, the theft of our money under the Title IV funding, and then the re-education of our children, and overall the effect is the destruction of the family unit. So that's the big picture in respect to what's happening. And we talked a little bit about solutions, and many people try a lot of different things, and we want to get into talking a little bit about that more with you today. But we also have some other things that we want to talk about. In respect to all of the things that we've been talking about, one thing I just want to hit right off the top is that we know that under Title IV funding that the states are, that they have to have a plan under the Adoption of State Families Act, which is Public Law 10589. People can look that up, the ASFA. A lot of it is in Title 42, Chapter 7. Look that up on the internet. You can read a lot about some of the things in there. But pursuant, look, we are no fans of ASFA. We are working we feel that this is the main culprit, the root cause of what's driving a lot of the child theft and the Title IV money theft across our country. However, with that, we just want to highlight for your viewers today that in order for the states to receive funding via the ASFA and in Title IV, upon the removal of a child from their parents, and I'm going to cite the law that's written there, just to show another fraudulent element within the actual overall element in respect to the big picture of what the states are doing and not doing, in respect to what happened with us and what we are discovering is happening to many other American families. And people can find this in 42 U.S. Code, Chapter 7, Section 671A. And I'm going to read this just so we can get it on the record and so your viewers can follow it. But it says the requisite features of the state plan. Now, when they put this together, it says that in order for a state to be eligible for payments under this part, it shall have a plan approved by the Secretary, meaning the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I'm pretty sure that's who that's referring to there. And in paragraph 3, it says, provides that the plan shall be in effect in all political subdivisions of the state, and if administered by them, be mandatory upon them. Okay, so this is a key point, that what I'm going to read here is mandatory for the states to follow in order to receive Title IV funding. And if you scroll on down in that section to paragraph 29, part of the plan states that they shall provides that within 30 days after the removal of a child from the custody of the parent or parents of the child, the state shall exercise due diligence to identify and provide notice to the following adult relatives: all adult grandparents, all parents of a sibling of the child, where such parent has the legal custody of such sibling, and other adult relatives of the child, including any other adult relatives suggested by the parents, subject to exceptions. And it'll list, family or domestic violence. I'm pretty sure that would include like criminal activity. And so that within 30 days, okay, they are supposed to identify all adult relatives and notify all adult relatives. And so a little bit further down, it reads, and that what I just read there was in paragraph 29. It says that at the option of the state provides for the state to enter into any kinship guardian assistance agreements to provide kinship guardian assistance payments. And we know, however, though, that most cases, children are being placed in foster care because the big money flows out for the foster care placement and not for the relative placement. So there is another section in here, and it states that I'm not able to find it right now, but the key point is that they're supposed to provide notice within 30 days to give the relatives an opportunity to participate and come to an understanding of what they can do under federal, state, and local law to be the care providers for their children in order to receive the Title IV funding. And so as part of providing that notice, they're supposed to also let the relatives of the prospective child who's being removed know that if they don't respond to the notice of what could potentially happen. And so what we're finding is that many of the families, ourselves included, when they stole our children under this law, they did not identify adult relatives within the 30-day notice. And so in talking with other families across the country, and it'd be interesting to hear what many of your viewers may have to say, maybe in the comment section, or even in contacting us in email, if their other adult relatives in their family were given notice within 30 days, because if not, then what's happening there, just in respect to as ASFA, the stipulations of ASFA exist, that in order for the states to receive the funding, as I just read there at the beginning, is to be mandatory upon them in paragraph 3. So again, I'm going to repeat that: 42 U.S. Code, Chapter 7, Section 671A, paragraph 3, and then 29. And it says it's supposed to specify the child is being removed from the custody of the parent or children or the parents of the child. And as I said before, I just found it here, explains the options the relative has under federal, state, and local law to participate in the care and placement of the child, including any options that may be lost by failing to respond to the notice. And so where this is important in respect to what we're talking about is that in many of the families that we've come to a knowledge of this, that children are not being placed with relatives. They're not being placed with grandparents. There are exceptions, there are times when that does occur, but for the most case, they're being put with strangers in the foster care. And then we find that parents and their relatives are not being notified until at some point later, when it just gets so bad where, eventually people find out, but it's way beyond the 30-day period after the foster care placements usually have already been made, to the harm of the child and to the egregious injury to the family unit at large. And so don't want to spend too much time on this and belabor it too bad, but the point is that this is mandatory upon the states in order to receive the Title IV funding. And where that is not occurring, that is a fraud point. They are then committing fraud. The states are committing fraud who are receiving the Title IV funding, who should not otherwise be doing it. And they should be able to provide proof that they're providing this notice. I mean, you would think that if that was being followed, they would send out like a certified mail receipt or something to say, yep, we notified all the adult relatives. And then think about how that maybe would slow things down a little bit from this rampant operation that they're running across the country to the injury of so many families. I mean, you would have to slow down and maybe think twice in respect to maybe what you're doing. And none of this should be happening anyway, unless there's a crime involved, as we talked about. But just to show that even when you get so far down this line in respect to the overall fraudulent operation, this is another fraud point against the American people because we're funding it. And our position is that this should be a cause for immediate dissolution of any case of any state that is continuing to receive Title IV funding, because they're getting it fraudulently if they have not provided notice to all adult relatives within 30 days. And so that's the key highlight in respect to that. And this is happening in all 50 states. We know it. And we've identified several states. We don't know about every state, but all the families we've been talking to in many states are telling us that no, their adult relatives were not receiving these so-called notices within 30 days. And so I just wanted to give it back over to you for any comment, or if you had heard anything about that in respect to that.
Well, no, but I just interviewed a father this week, John Sullivan, and I've interviewed him before. And apparently his case was that his ex was living, I don't know if it was miles, I don't know how many miles away from him, but apparently she did not have proper living situation. So they took the kids away from her. They never notified John Sullivan of anything. And they just put those kids, I think 2 went into a foster home and one of them went into some other um, home as well. And then the next day or in a period of time, CPS comes knocking on his door in the state of Michigan, Holland, Michigan, and said that, well, they couldn't find the father. They couldn't locate him at all. But suddenly they're at his door. So why aren't they giving him his kids back? But since he's on disability, they're taking half of his disability for Title 4D funding. And those kids are still in foster care. He can't get them back. No one will help him. I don't know if anyone can help him. That's the scary part.
Yeah, well, when you look at the system overall and how it's operating, and that's just horrible to hear that they're taking the disability payment. It's like, that, the whole damaging effect on that is like, well, a lot of people depend on those things, like they're in a disabled situation, in order to, meet your basic needs, or, the impact of that across the country, not just in respect to that situation, but where disability is involved, but also you would look at like people subject to child support like us. And we talked about that. I mean, it's just very, very damaging when they're stealing your money personally, and then they're also stealing the American people's money through Title IV.
Mhm.
And so they just can come after you into your bank accounts, and who or what is there to defend you on that? It's like,
Right.
there is no one. And so it's like, the effect of that is very damaging to where people are being made homeless.
Exactly.
And where, Terri talks a lot about advocacy, and where advocacy is so important, because, even in notifying families, and, part of the notification of families goes beyond just what we talked about. It's about what you're doing, Marianne, and many other people, in respect to what's really going on, because a lot of families there are some families that are not there for parents and children because they think that, oh, they must have done something wrong and I don't want to be involved, right? But that's not what's going on. And so the information part of it, and what you're faithfully doing and getting this word out to people is hopefully going to result in advocacy until we can address and eliminate the root cause of the problem and fix it, because that's what we're in it for. We're not in here to do triage. Just, we would like to see children return to their parents, but unless we solve the problem of what's driving this entire thing, they're just going to keep going out into our neighborhoods and grabbing 4 or 5 more kids here and there, and it just keeps going and going and going. And so that's kind of one thing I want to throw out for all of your viewers, is that we talk a lot about all those solutions, and maybe we can do that as we go along. But a lot of people have tried a lot of different things, and our angle of attack and what we're trying to do through the information campaign and joining people together with the mission is, and I'll just kind of sneak right into it now, but. And we talked a little bit about this in our prior interview with you, but connecting people together, because, people have been for representatives of our Congress. We've been to our representatives, but when you go in small groups, or you go in by yourself, they tend to string you along, and they'll say, oh yeah, well, and then eventually, they stop talking to you, and then there you are, right? And so when you look at our Congress, the heart of our republic, and they're supposed to be the ones who provide the oversight for all of the other areas of our government. If they ignore you and they just turn you away and make you feel like, well, there's nothing else that you can do, well, they're going to keep doing this. And there's we have 100 senators and 435, I guess it is, representatives. So each one of those is in all 50 of our states. And so part of our strategy and our tactic is that we can get the people to join together and raise their voice en masse and be connected with the Let Our Children Go mission, that we can build that network of people, and not just along those lines, but also to be proactive. There's a saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if you have local action networks within your community, we have a right to show up in our community to find out what's going on. And if we can prevent people who are involved in child trafficking networks from stealing more kids, we're going to save a child. We're going to maybe save a family or a parent. And it doesn't mean we have to be violent. It just means we can show up and ask questions. We can, we can record what's going on. And, and maybe they'll think twice about maybe going through what it is that they're doing. But then you have them on record, right? You've got more evidence for whatever it is. And so, if you've got, a lot of us in our communities will have, we have these signs in our communities about a neighborhood watch group. What about a neighborhood watch group for our fellow neighbors, for our parents and children? Do we know our neighbors? Do we know that someone's going to show up and maybe make an allegation against them? And do we know our neighbors well enough? We're going to say, no, that's not true. That's not them. I know that's not them. Right.
Mhm.
I mean, we've been subject to that. We have evidence of such a thing, that someone's making an allegation, and we've got all the proof to show that the entire allegation is false.
Mhm.
But from the power of a community, the power of an individual that we the people possess individually is really only significant when we can join that together and show up. And so part of the vision is that in order to get the votes in Congress, we the people have to let them know that we're going to be the votes. We're going to be the votes, and you see our votes. Here's our votes. Okay, whether it be out here on the internet or in their face. And I mean, maybe we do need to show up at their offices and get in their face.
Mhm.
So because we've tried that with even a small group of people. We know other people have tried it with other groups of people, but we need more numbers. We need more people. Okay, we need more people informed as to the truth of what's going on. And so go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, with this extravagant kidnapping network that they've been running for before even ASFA came along, with what was it, 85,000 children missing from Missouri out of foster homes. And to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone went looking for those kids.
No.
So,
Where are they, right?
exactly. And everyone's drawing their own conclusions as to what could have happened to these kids. And it's worse than this child trafficking, sexual abuse.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that, Marianne? I mean, you've been interviewing a lot of people. You've been talking. You had it happen to you. I think, as I recall, you actually tried to go into the system, and you shared a little bit about what happened there. But what do you think has to happen? I mean, in respect to what you've heard is going on and how we attack this, how we address it, how do we fix it? What are your thoughts?
Well, some parents aren't contracting. Say they get their kids taken away, so they don't contract. They don't go into that courtroom. Granted, they're not going to get their kids back, but I'm thinking, and I'm just talking. I'm just thinking, if we don't go into these courtrooms for family court, federal court, whatever, then they're defunded. I mean, they're not getting the attention and going into a courtroom and sucking up taxpayers' dollars over a false allegation. Granted, then you have the problem with the Title IV incentives that if they take your kid, they're going to come after you for child support. So I think the whole thing needs to be repealed. The Title IVs, get rid of ASFA, and the CPS has got to go. There's no way. There should be another system put in place with casework, with we'll say licensed social workers with a degree in psychology. They've got to be a higher caliber than what we're dealing with, which is a bunch of lackadaisical, inept fat loads. And that's all I see. They all look the same. Have you noticed that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, no, this is definitely unfolding like a script. And, we talked a little bit about it being a seditious operation, and it's even more than that. A lot of times we'll hear the words, corruption, and, but we've been calling it some other things that we see is really what's happening. So the seditious operation and what that is, and we can talk about that here in a few minutes. And then even something else, maybe toward the end, which is even probably bigger, and I think more accurately depicts what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
But just to touch upon a couple of things that you talked about there, you actually went in, was it the federal court? Is that correct?
Oh yeah, I went into federal court to
Yeah.
that. Okay, everybody, just so everybody knows, don't bother, because the judge actually came out and said he did not read my evidence and he ruled it irrelevant. So I took it to the appellate court, whereas 3 months later they dismissed it. So all that aggravation, stress, the stress on my family was not worth it because these judges aren't doing their jobs.
Right. Marianne, I appreciate you saying that because, and look, we don't want to discourage anybody from trying anything and everything available
True.
to them. Okay. However, consider what is happening to others around you who have been in that similar situation. And then consider where you want to expend your time and your resources and your efforts if you are subject to this situation. Like in our case, because of the infiltration and corruption and actually, the outright seditious thing that we discovered, when you have a compromised and controlled court system, that's a self-acclaimed national model, and you kind of clearly identify it on the evidence and the operation. You pursue the law enforcement angle and you go down that path because look, there was no place for us to appeal our situation. We knew that. When you have evidence, significant amount of hard evidence showing an infiltration and corruption in the system, it begs the question as to how far does that go into that court system? So what would be the point of appealing it? If there's a child trafficking network out operating there, that may even involve, sexual exploitation of children based on other things that we've seen in that area in respect to our case, as well as maybe even, the movement of drugs, possibly. We've heard that that's also associated with some of these type of situations. But so when we identified the crimes, you report the crime to the law enforcement branch of your government, which is the executive branch. They're responsible for investigating and prosecuting and then punishing. And so, they say that they have immunity, but we already talked about federal law and the 14th Amendment that says, and from our second interview, that they don't have immunity. That's a right, and they can't take away our rights. And that's going to segue into what we'll talk about the sedition and then the other thing, which I won't mention here, just to keep everybody hooked in. But so I want to encourage everybody to try everything. But if you try the law enforcement branch and say, oh no, they have immunity, you try your civil suits and the attorneys come up with various reasons as to why they won't help you, and tell you that you should just be subject to dictation and tyranny and just do what they tell you when you haven't been charged with a crime. And then, you've got civilian attorneys out there, so you can't really get civil remedy who aren't going to help you, or even in your case, like you tried it, right?
Mm-hmm.
This kind of goes back to the point I just mentioned a few minutes ago about the 30-day notice. We had come across another case, and I'll let Terri, comment here on this a little bit about what she found out about it. But there was someone involved in a court case, and one of the statements from the judge. You want to talk about that?
Well, we've started doing a show, Marianne, that people can find on Rumble by searching for Let Our Children Go. And what we're doing is highlighting families by state. So our first series we did regarding the state of Texas. And now we've started on the state of Florida. We did have a special report in there from a mom from Ohio. But so what we're trying to do is to highlight how this issue is occurring across all 50 states. And so any of your listeners that are interested, in sharing their story once we come upon their state, we'd love for them to reach out and connect with us about discussing that. But so we started Florida last week. And the first family that we had on for Florida is a family that has been in the mainstream news. I think there are about 7 lawsuits in now, somewhere around there. And they're still going before this one federal judge in the case. She didn't dismiss it, I guess. She told them they needed to come back and attack it from a different angle, I guess. And I guess what they were trying to put forth initially was what Mark was talking about the relative notification. And the judge was basically telling them that that was not enforceable. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because
Yeah,
what
that
he said.
I think from what the individual said, that the judge said that what I just read about that 30-day notice wasn't enforceable. Now consider that. Okay, here you are talking about what I just read in that section 42 U.S. Code Chapter 7. I think it was well, I just lost my reference point. But anyway, the key thing is that it says in order for the states to receive the Title IV funding, that the plan that they agree to with the federal government that is mandatory upon them, that is binding. Okay, so if you have something that's mandatory or with the force of law, and then if they're not following that, after they agree to say, yeah, we're going to follow that, that's misrepresentation. I guess you could say of a material fact. Like it would rise to the level of defrauding the federal government, which is ultimately defrauding we the people of the United States, because we're funding it, right? So to say that that's not enforceable, well, yes, it is enforceable because it's a fraud point. Okay, it's fraud on the American people. It's theft of our Title IV Social Security money, where they're not following the things that are required by law. And so it just goes to show that, look, these people within our system that are facilitating this scheme, and they know how much money that they're getting under Title IV funding. They know it. Okay, the governors know it, and that's why they're not doing anything. The representatives at our state level, they're the ones receiving the money. So if you as family A think you're just going to go there and they're going to listen to you, well, we've already been there and done that. Many other families have been there and done that. People have filed court cases, federal suits. They either get them dismissed, they come up with some lame reason as to why they're not going to proceed. And then there you are, maybe 5 years later, still without your kids and maybe 6 figures in debt, and you're in a worse situation. And so while the problem continues to unfold to many other families across the country, to the very destructive effects all across the board, from the families to the children involved, our national debt. I mean, I would like to see someone do an audit in respect to how much money that has been stolen out of our Title IV funding, in respect to how that's affected our national debt going all the way back to 97 to 97. That would be a very interesting thing to look at. So again, though, we're not discouraging anybody from pursuing your course of action, because what we felt that we had to do was going through every avenue available to us, that when we did come out in the public arena, that we had everything that we would need to show the American people that, yep, we have been there and done that. And here's the evidence that we have derelict people within our system that we're paying in their positions to facilitate or enable or continue to allow these schemes to unfold. And so that's why we feel that this is a we the people issue. And, we can either sit back and hope that someone else takes care of it, but do you want to wait another 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years and lose your kids, not really knowing where they end up? Maybe some of them don't even make it out alive. And so, that's why it's like, yeah, try everything, but what's going to be the one thing that you think is going to bring you about the most immediate resolution to the problem? And that's what we talked about in our follow-up interview with you, our number 2, about the deprivation of our rights, because that's the common thread that's occurring all across the country, and what we can see and connecting with people, that there's a common theme. All the cases are a little bit different, and they all have their outrageous things, but joining together in our locales. General Flynn talked about local action and national impact, so that's what we're focusing on. It's a local action and national impact. And when people are thrust into this, Marianne, I'm sure maybe I don't really know what your feelings were, but it would be pretty normal to be pretty terrorized to what people go through in the midst of this, right? I mean, and then just trying to get remedy or justice, and just all of the emotions of that. But there's a lot of people that are scared. And what we want to try to do is to help people eliminate that fear, is to let them know that we care, and that, you know, we know that there is good people that still live in our beautiful country. And a lot of us are being, are having our light being diminished in various ways. And we have to overcome that fear.
Well, this is a level of domestic terrorism that I have never seen in my life. I don't know why anyone would want to immigrate here. It's beyond me.
Yeah, well, the real thing that we had at one time has obviously been, I guess we've been all kind of transformed into some sort of an illusion. And we got to wake up to the illusion, and we got to work real hard to get back to the real thing, because it was the real thing that made our country great. And it's going to be this illusion and deception, the seduction that's going on, that if we don't fix it, it's going to enslave and destroy us. And our children are going to be living under tyranny and despotism, the very thing that our founders established this country to eliminate. And we're letting it happen under this disguise of safety and best interest of a child, or, you know, safety and best interest of this or that or whatever. And that kind of goes into the other point of what I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes. But so, you know, the focus of it is that we have to properly assess what's really going on. And but not to discourage anyone, but we're still looking for an attorney to give people an update.
Right.
We just went through a whole other network, a whole other group of attorney, a small group, you know, showing them, you know, just telling them what was going on, that we had these federal questions in an attempt to get someone to take the case. Nope, they won't take it.
Well,
And it doesn't matter. Go
right.
ahead.
I mean, even if I don't know if it was John Sullivan that said it, or another parent that told me that, hey, if I can get a civil rights attorney to help me with this case, they can have all the money. I don't care about the winnings. Just do it and take the money and get these people held to accountability.
Yes. And so, you know, when you look at like our Congress, and, you know, we do you know, our representatives every 2 years, but, you know, the pressure point is our Congress, but we, the people, have to apply the pressure. And the way we do that is by joining together and showing up. And, you know, your representative or your senator have an office in your locale.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it starts with that small group, and, you know, you can just get together and meet somewhere. But, you know, having protests just for the sake of protests or protesting, look, we're not discouraging anyone from exercising their First Amendment right to peaceably assemble and exercise their right to free speech. Go ahead and do that. But what is your end game? Okay. I mean, what, and, you know, you got to make sure you're not barking up the wrong tree, because a lot of time, look, I mean, the judicial system, corrupt as it is going to do what the judicial system is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones who are going to be accountable, most accountable to we the people, are our representatives at the state and federal level. So we've got the states who are conspiring with these people to allow it to happen, to steal our kids and our money. And we've got the federal who are enabling it, who are providing it. And we have access to both of that. And so, you know, if it, like in our situation, you know, why is it the Department of Justice not investigating? Well, we know why. Just look at what's been happening in there for the last, you know, going back to at least 2016, if not longer, to the current day. What's happening, you know, what we see happening in the news at large.
Mm-hmm.
And we have plenty of evidence of that, of dereliction and disregard, and, you know, but that's where Congress provides oversight and holds that they have, you know, the power to impeach and the power to remove, you know. And, you know, they can play these little dog and pony shows with us, but if we don't hold their feet to the fire, they're just going to keep leading us along, and we're going to be here another 10 years saying the same thing. And our children are going to be subject to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the real driver for us, is that, and what we've seen with even some other families, is that their children who have been in the system are then at increased risk of having their children one day be taken from them just because they were in the system.
Mm-hmm. Right. It haunts them. If it happened to the parent, and then when that child grows up and has a family, CPS is bothering them. It's just a continuous sickening flow of a pattern of destruction.
Right. And so, I know your audience. Look, you have a lot of great interviews out there, but we would encourage anyone out there who's watching this one, or you watch another one. Um, you know, uh, do a do a good at-large self-assessment and ask yourself some questions, some of the questions that we're talking about in respect to what you want to see happen, where you want this to go, because this is what we're talking about, Marianne. This is not a good thing for any child. It's not a good thing for any parent. It's not a good thing for our society. They're only getting away with it because they projected this lying narrative. And, in addition to engaging our representatives and senators, it's important that we also engage our neighbors and inform them as to the truth of what's going on. Refer them to, Marianne's channel and say, look at some of these things, and look at these people, this is what we have to do, but it has to have a result of where we're going to go, right? And so this is where we want to go. We feel that if we can get people to join together, reach out to us with an email, check out our websites. We will get connected with you, and we will encourage you and support you in any way that we can while you're looking at other angles. I mean, it might be that maybe you do have a good investigator or prosecuting attorney, but you need all those, and then you need a good judge, right? And then you'd be able to support yourself through an appeal process, because these other people on the other end have that unlimited amount of money, and they can string you along. And so we don't want to wait, another 7 years. It's been over 7 years for us, and we've tried everything else. And so that's why we're out here to try to facilitate that peaceful resolution with we the people power that we all possess. And so, we always thought that if we could start with those most affected, like many you've had on your program, and then with veterans and churches, and then branch out into our neighborhoods, it's just real simple to strike up a conversation and just ask someone, have you heard about this or whatever? And like, well, no, I haven't. Just give them a website, give them a link to Marianne's channel and say, look at some of this stuff, right? And that this is a threat to you if you have kids, or if you maybe want to have kids, or someone who has kids, okay? Because they're coming for our kids. And if you have thoughts about any other things that are being done to children, it's not just about their taking and the money, but the drugging and then the subjection to medical experimentation and many other things, that are being done to kids, which is very harmful. And so, when we look at the big picture, we don't really hear much and hardly any. We've been in this, like I said, for over 7 years, but we have never heard anyone, Marianne, say how great this is. That you took my kids, and thank you for taking my money and destroying my livelihood. We don't ever hear that. So we should not be letting our neighbors not know about it. Okay. We need to let them know about it. And, if you can just talk to one person a day, or just write Marianne's channel on YouTube down, everybody knows YouTube, and hand it to somebody and say, check this out. You might be surprised as to, and give them let them know how to reach you. You might be surprised as to what kind of feedback that you might be getting. So we invite everyone on your channel, get connected with us, and we'll help you build that local action network. But Marianne, before I get into the final thing here, in respect to what we see as the big picture that people may not be thinking about, I wanted to let you know, or just give it back over to you for any other comments you wanted to say before I get into that.
Okay, I'll just mention one quick thing. I was at a fabric store, and they wanted me to round up. Do you want to round up for kids medical pharmaceuticals, something like that? And I said, no. And I said, do you realize the state of Texas is using foster kids as guinea pigs with medications that the FDA hasn't approved yet? And she just stared at me. And of course, there's no one behind me to hear all this either. It was just me in line. But I'm telling this woman about this stuff that goes on. And I said, have a nice day.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're going to continue this good fight, and even at some point, should our children, be returned to us, and we do want to just mention a little bit of a good thing here. Even though we've had three of our 7 have aged out, and two of our older girls, we're having a real difficult time connecting with them. One won't even speak to us at all. And you know, so the effects is that it's very damaging to the family bond. You know, we had a very beautiful, loving home, and we're still fighting for all of them to reclaim our family unit. Now, the younger four, we still have not seen or heard from them since they were kidnapped from us. And we know who's involved in their little network, their little child trafficking network, and they've been at that for probably, I don't know, more than 10 years, probably closer to 15, based on the evidence that we have. And so we know who's involved, and we know that they're a national model, and that, like you were saying, in respect to and what we were saying about it unfolding like a script, and that being that they were the pilot project there in Jefferson County, Kentucky, that what's happening across the country, that we feel pretty confident. And you know, this is why we went to the Department of Justice and requested a case of national interest, because all of our evidence and criteria met the Department of Justice criteria for a case of national interest. And we let them know that. And we wanted not just our case, but to enjoin other cases that we were aware of to it. And they basically ignored us, and we never got any response or action to it. Even after we went to the U.S. attorneys in West Virginia, and they were convinced enough to send it back to Kentucky, who never looked at it. You know, they told us, strangely, and this is just the craziness of it all, that after we had been to the FBI several times, when the West Virginia U.S. attorney sent our information, having been pretty convinced that we were showing, because he told us, if you show me evidence of a federal crime, we'll investigate and prosecute it. Well, we did that. He said, well, I have to send it back to Kentucky. So when he sent it back to Kentucky, their response to us was that we should go to the FBI. So if they had actually looked at our evidence and the number of crime reports that we had submitted to the Louisville division of the FBI, they would have never told us to go back to the FBI, because they would have seen that we had already been there. And so it was just an indicator to us that they never looked at it, because they would have never said that to us. They basically probably just set it off to the side, gave us some, you know, canned response, and you know, hey, good luck, right? See you later. So that's why we continued up to the chain all the way. We didn't stop there. We continued all the way up to the highest levels of the Department of Justice, and even to the Inspector General, and yet no action, no redress, no remedy. And so, you know, you can even go up to the highest levels and get certified hand receipts and have all of your evidence, and you know, and you can still be in a situation like we are. And so we're still hoping, you know, but it doesn't look like they did anything with it. And so that's why we're out here, because we're going to expose them all, and we're going to show it. We're going to show everybody, you know, anything and everything we can. We've already started it, and more is coming. We have a lot more. It could go on for weeks or months with the amount of evidence that we have. And we're not going to be afraid, because we know that the American people, properly informed, will be moved to act. And this kind of segues into the final point here that I want to make, that Terri and I want to make. You know, Marianne, we can look to the law to tell us a lot of what's going on. You know, the law will expose a crime, it will identify a crime, but the crime arises from something that happened or is happening, right? That would justify the taking of action to mitigate that issue, you know, the criminal aspect. So we were talking about corruption. You know, corruption is a common word that we throw around with respect to these problems. And we were talking a little bit about sedition. And you know, seditious conspiracy is also a federal crime. And I want to read a little bit more about that for everyone, just so that they can kind of see another aspect of this. But basically, sedition or a seditious conspiracy is when, and you can find this in 18 U.S. Code. Okay, so it's a federal law. That's a federal crime. Chapter 115, Section 2384. And it says basically anyone who conspires by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States. Right now, in respect to what we were talking about in respect to immunity, we identified in 42 U.S. Code, Chapter 21, Section 1981, that the right to civil remedy and criminal justice is just that. It's a right, and that's a law. And that's protected by the 14th Amendment Equal Protection of Laws, which is also our law. That's our supreme law, our Constitution. And so when you look at these color of law immunity, these color of laws giving immunity at the state level and even at the federal level now, that is not just a deprivation of rights, but that is also evidence of a seditious conspiracy that's been happening in our country. And all 50 states have these immunity laws. So we're being deprived of our right to have justice and civil remedy. And we're being deprived of a law of the United States by force, by the color of law. And that is a federal crime and is a seditious conspiracy because there's more than one. It's in all 50 states.
Mhm.
So who do we go to? The Department of Justice. We've already been there and done that, right? We've been to our representatives and to our senators. We've been to, you know, our executive officials, and here we sit, right? And so the bigger picture is like when you talk about corruption, no, it's much bigger than that. Corruption would be like a small pockets here and there while you have other pockets that are still operating effectively. When you start seeing all the happening widespread across the country and so many things happening similarly like a script and what you're saying, it rises to that higher level. And then it's even bigger than that. And this is where I'm gonna highlight this and something that we've been making a point of, and in respect to genocide, and what genocide is. Like when you hear genocide, Marianne, what do you think about?
A lot of mass murders going on.
Yeah, people would think, oh, genocide, that sounds like, you know, an intentional like mass murder.
Mhm.
But, you know, a lot of people don't really spend the time to get into reading the law. And I would encourage people that if you have the time, go into your favorite internet search and just type in US code. And just start looking at any of the US codes, the US laws in respect to maybe what you're dealing with in any situation, because you may not always get a straight answer from some attorneys. Many of them may not even know what the law says because they're not spending time reading it themselves. So it serves to your benefit to know. And so we can look at some of the things that are happening. If people want to look at this, so I'm going to read it and we can comment on it, or if you have anything you want to say about it in respect to what genocide is. Yes, it does involve killing of people, but people can find this in 18 U.S. Code, Chapter 50A, and it's Section 1091, and then I'm also going to cover 1093. In 1090, the basic offense for genocide says that whoever, whether in time of peace or in time of war, and with a specific intent to destroy, in whole or in substantial part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. Number one is kills members of the group. Now, that's not the only one. There's a few more, and I'm going to identify those. Number two would be causes serious bodily injury to members of that group. Number three would be because causes the permanent impairment of the mental faculties of members of the group through drugs, torture, or similar techniques. Do we see some of those things happening in respect to children and what we're talking about here? I would say yes. We've also seen where some people end up not coming out of the system alive. So that would fit number one, more than one. Number four would be subjects the groups to conditions of life that are intended to cause the physical destruction of the group in whole or in part. So many people who end up, you know, in situations where they don't want to continue on, yeah, you're subjecting people like that to that kind of a situation. Number five would be imposes measures intended to prevent births within the group. So like if you're a religious family and you want your daughters to be able to procreate, and you've got another group of people that have taken them and said, oh no, we're not going to let you do that. We're going to do this thing to you or do that thing to you. Well, that would fit that criteria. Number six, and this is a key thing. Number six is transfers by force children of the group to another group. Transfers by force the children of one group to another group. Now remember, the criteria was a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. So like in our case, for our family, we were a family of 9. We were a faith-based Christian religion family, and our children were stolen from us and they were given to people either with a different religion or with no religion at all. So they're being denied. So basically they ripped apart the religious aspect of our group. Of our group. And so in 1093, it identifies the definitions of what these things are. The term children means the plural. It means individuals who have not attained the age of 18 years. Number two would be the term ethnic group means a set of individuals whose identity is such as distinctive in terms of common cultural traditions or heritage. I'm not going to read all of them here, but number six would be the term racial group means a set of individuals whose identity as such is distinctive in terms of physical characteristics or biological descent. And number seven, the term religious group means a set of individuals whose identity is such as distinctive in terms of common religious creed, beliefs, doctrines, practices, or rituals. And it talks also a little bit about in that chapter 58, 18 U.S. Code, chapter 15A, 50A, that attempt and conspiracy, any person who attempts or conspires to commit an offense under this section shall be punished in the same manner as the person who completes the offense. And so when you see what's happening to families in respect to what we're talking about, it meets the other criteria beyond just killing people. You know, when you have, like in the case of the family we were talking about earlier, they were of a different racial descent of a family, and yet their daughter was placed with someone of a different racial of a different race. And you know, this is happening also across our country, to where that ethnicity and that heritage is being broken up, and it does meet the criteria of a genocidal operation at large. And so, you know, a group would probably be, you know, would be more than one. Let's just face it. I mean, you know, a group would be plural number of people. So you got seven kids, like in our case, and they're split between two families, and they're not with the ones of their biological descent. Well, it meets that criteria I talked about in respect to biological descent, where there's no charge or conviction of a crime. And so when this is happening, like that script that you were talking about at large across the country, it does meet the criteria for a genocidal operation. And so it's really important that we break down the lying narrative, and, you know, the way they water this down. This is a genocidal operation in disguise of safety and best interest. This is conspiracy born out of the corruption, but the corruption is so extensive and pervasive, it does meet all the criteria for the sedition. And because we see the deprivations of our rights that's happening, the breakup and injury to our children, the injury to parents and the family unit at large, and that is the threat to our country. And that's where when people hear the word, we need to start calling things that we see happening what the law actually shows is happening in our country. And so hopefully that will maybe move people to take a deeper look into that themselves and see how those things apply into their respective situations with their children and where their children are ending up. And maybe that will be the mover and shaker to get us going to where we need to go to bring an end to this. And so that's why we're in it. And we want to say thank you for hosting us and being so generous to Marianne with your time, not just today, but in our other interviews. So I'm going to give it back over to you for any other comments or questions you may have.
Well, I mean, I know you had mentioned this is a national issue, but and you know as well, this is a global issue. This is going on everywhere. In fact, there was a director that did a documentary called The Eyes of the Devil. It's a documentary on YouTube. I think everyone should go look at that. And it will open your eyes to what's going on everywhere. Pretty creepy. Yes.
And so, you know, when you see it happening, as big and extensive and at large as it is, it's important that we call a spade and shoot down the lying narrative and speak the truth. And so we thank you for bringing forward tidbits of truth, and we hope that other people will join with us, because we're always wanting to learn. And you know, we're constantly digging and looking and just looking for those indicators and those pieces. And most importantly, you know, we care about our fellow Americans, and we care about you know, that's why I served. You know, I mean, I serve because I know that America at heart is good. And I know that most Americans, you know, love their freedom, and we love our families, we love our children. And, you know, that's what drives us, is that we do still have faith that we, the people properly informed, will bring about liberty and justice for all again. Because we can't say that if we let people, these kind of dark forces immunize themselves against criminal justice or remedy. There is no justice for all. So, you know, if we've ever said the Pledge of Allegiance, you know, let us act on it, you know, and let's get active and do what we have to do. And again, and always peaceful. That's what we're about. We're not about violence. We don't promote or advocate it. You know, we do have a right to defend ourselves, but we want to proceed peacefully. But we, the people, have the power. And so it's out there for you, Mr. and Mrs. America. We're willing to do what we have to do. And so, you know, do anything you can. Well, let's do the most, the best thing before us that we can do to get the fastest results along the lines of what we talked about. So thank you again, Marianne. I really appreciate it. And we look forward to staying in contact with you in the future.
Oh, definitely. You'll be back. And I'm sure listeners may wonder, what state are you going to go into next after Florida? Because you went
Well, I'm looking at, we've got some families that we're already in contact with in Ohio, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania. So it's probably going to be one of those three. So yeah, but please reach out to us. And if there's like an urgent situation, like we had sort of with the mom in Ohio the other day, we can try to do a special report to get the information out. And anybody that wants to reach us, the best way probably is through the contact form on the website at letourchildrengo.org. Just look for the contact button there, or our email address is listed on there. That's the best way to be able to reach us. And then anybody that is on any social platforms like Twitter or Truth Social, etc. Just do a search for Let Our Children Go, and hopefully it'll pop up there with our daisy flower logo.
Yep.
And yeah, if you can just share that. There's one of the things I try to do with that is to put out the mainstream news articles that are coming out about the dangerous foster care system, to help people to become more aware of how dangerous this system is, like you were trying to do with the person in the fabric store. Because people are just, they aren't aware. They think it's about protecting the children, and we do want to protect the children, and the way that we can protect the children is by protecting the rights of the parents so that they can protect their children unless there's been a crime involved that they're charged and convicted of, and due process is played out. And I think that is just one of the really big parts to this problem, that the average American does not understand how this thing unfolds. They think that if children are in the foster care system, they came from an abusive home, and that, oh, they're just being re-victimized again, instead of getting to the root of the problem, that these children, a lot of them are being taken from their families, where there has been no conviction of a crime. It's going through the civil family court system, and the children are in danger that are in the foster care system. So if you don't know what to do, you can just share a mainstream news article and say, hey, did you know this is happening to kids in the foster care system? And that they're running this thing where the parents aren't even charged with a crime, and they're able to take their kids and keep them. And anybody out there, if you've reached out to us in the past and you haven't gotten a response from us, it may be that we have not gotten to it yet, or it may be that it ended up in your spam folder or somewhere. So please reach out to us if we haven't been able to connect with you yet, or it's been a while. Please, let's reconnect. And because we're working on bringing about a solution. We also want to offer support to the families that are going through this, and work on the restoration part with your family members, even if your children have been taken and you haven't been able to get them back. That there will be a time when they will be an adult and they'll be able to make those decisions. And so part of what we want to do is to help families with support and restoration for when that time comes.
Well, definitely. Well, I'm so glad you both came back on. Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Mark and Terri Stemann of LetOurChildrenGo.org in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you so much, Mark and Terri.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you.